Where did you find this?
I don't know what it is.
Don't lie to me!
How long have you known Little Nurse? Luca Santoro asked, his blood-blackened phone lying open in his palm like a confession with teeth. 10 minutes earlier, Nora Vale had found a listening device hidden beneath the shattered case, still blinking under a smear of his blood. The man on her trauma bed was not a businessman, not a donor, and not the harmless VIP the hospital director claimed he was. He was the most dangerous mafia boss in Boston, and the bug meant someone close enough to touch him wanted him dead. Nora had recognized the tiny soda mark instantly because secrets like that had once burned her childhood home to ash. Mercy St. Anne's Hospital did not usually receive kings with bullets in their ribs, but midnight made every rule negotiable. The emergency bay doors burst open under red lights, rain blowing in behind 4 men in dark suits, who moved with terrifying silence around a stretcher. Nora was already there, gloved hands, steady voice sharp enough to slice through panic. Room 3 now. Somebody page vascular, and if one more man blocks my monitor, he can bleed in the hallway. The tallest bodyguard almost objected, then saw her eyes. Nora Vale was beautifully plus-size, lush and solid in navy scrubs, and she carried her body with the grounded confidence of a woman who refused to disappear. The patient on the stretcher looked carved out of violence. Even unconscious, Luca Santoro seemed to own the oxygen around him, his broad shoulders straining against a ruined obsidian suit, his jawline sharp beneath a bruise blooming purple at his cheekbone. Blood soaked his shirt. Expensive cologne tangled with copper and rain, and a cracked phone kept vibrating inside the pocket of his jacket. Nora cut fabric called pressure numbers and kept her attention exactly where it belonged. She was a trauma nurse, not a gossip, not a gangster's fan, and certainly not the kind of woman who froze because a dangerous man had a beautiful mouth. Still, the phone bothered her. It buzzed in a rhythm. No incoming call should make 3 pulses a pause, then 2 like a trapped insect knocking from under glass. Nora noticed because she noticed everything. Her father had repaired police, radios, burner phones, and forbidden little machines from a back room that smelled of solder dust and black coffee. Before nursing school, before the fire, before she swore never to touch that world again, Nora had learned how to hear bad circuitry by listening to silence. When the surgeon shouted for another clamp, she shoved the phone into a metal tray and told herself she was being paranoid. Paranoia became survival when Dr. Grant Mercer stepped into Trauma Room 3, wearing a white coat and the smirk that had once convinced Nora she was lucky to be loved at all. He was chief of surgery, hospital darling, donor favorite, and her ex-boyfriend, though he preferred to call their history a staffing mistake. His eyes swept over her curves with familiar cruelty. Move, Nora. This is a VIP case, not a chance for the chubby nurse to play hero. 2 interns stopped breathing. A security guard looked away. Nora's throat tightened, but her hands did not shake. Then operate, she replied quietly. I'll keep him alive long enough for your ego to catch up. Grant's smile sharpened because he hated when she did not crumble fast enough. Careful, he murmured near her ear, while Luca's monitors screamed. A girl your size should be grateful this hospital still lets her run. The insult landed in front of residents, orderlies, and armed strangers pretending not to listen. Nora swallowed it, because the patient mattered more than pride. She clamped, counted, passed instruments, and pretended the heat in her cheeks was only adrenaline. Then the phone buzzed again, skating across the metal tray by itself. The broken back cover loosened. Under the casing behind a false battery plate, a black seed of machinery blinked green. Nora's body went cold. It was not hospital equipment, not commercial spyware, not anything a regular enemy could buy online. The device was handmade, older in design, but cruelly upgraded with a crescent of silver solder near the antenna. Her father's mark. Her dead father's mark, copied or stolen by someone who had no right to it. She palmed the bug with a nurse's speed, slipping it into an empty specimen cup before Grant could turn around. "What are you doing?" he snapped. Nora closed the cup and dropped it in her scrub pocket. "Saving your VIP's life," she answered, and this time her voice carried enough steel to make him blink. Surgery lasted 41 brutal minutes. Luca Santoro should have been unconscious when they rolled him into the sealed VIP recovery suite, but dangerous men did not obey anesthesia like ordinary men. Nora was changing the blood bag when his hand closed around her wrist. It did not crush. It controlled. His eyes opened dark and fathomless, fiercely intelligent despite the pain shining at their edges. In his other hand lay the phone, already split apart, the empty place where the bug had been gaping like a missing tooth. His voice arrived as a gravelly baritone, low, lethal, and intimate. "How long have you known little nurse?" Nora's pulse slammed against his fingers. Since the CT transfer, she said, refusing to look down even though every instinct told her to retreat. Your phone vibrated like a relay, not a call. The bug was active. Luca's gaze sharpened with predatory calm. "And you removed it before telling my men. Because your men were touching your jacket, your director was watching my pockets, and somebody in this hospital wanted the signal to keep transmitting." His thumb moved once against her wrist. "Shockingly warm. That sounds rehearsed." "So does being accused by bleeding criminals," Nora breathed. "Do you want the truth, or do you want someone convenient to punish?" The suite went silent enough for Nora to hear rain clicking against the bulletproof glass. Luca's mouth curved faintly, not into a smile, but into recognition. He released her wrist, then immediately caught her chin between two fingers when she stepped back. The touch was gentle. The warning was not. "I am Luca Santoro." Nora almost laughed from fear because of course he was. The Santoro family owned half the Whispers in Boston, 3 harbors, 2 judges according to rumor, and every nightmare mothers used when their sons got too close to street corners. "Then I should leave," she whispered. "No," Luca replied. "You found death in my phone. You leave when I decide you are not part of it." The door opened before Nora could answer, and 3 of Luca's men filled the room like a wall of black wool and weapons kept carefully out of sight. Behind them came Grant Mercer, furious, polished and pale around the mouth. "Mr. Santoro," Grant announced, tone oily with forced authority, "this nurse has been removed from your case. She interfered with private property, mishandled evidence, and possibly endangered hospital security." Nora felt the old humiliation crawl up her spine. Grant pointed at her pocket. "Empty it, Nora. Don't make a scene." Luca did not raise his voice. He simply turned his head and the air dropped 10 degrees. "Doctor, every scene in this room belongs to me." Grant hesitated for half a second, then recovered behind the confidence of a man who had destroyed softer people for sport. With respect, she has a history of overstepping, emotional instability, body image resentment. She imagines insults where protocols exist. His eyes flicked to Nora with a smile no one else was meant to understand. She also has a habit of touching things that do not belong to her. Nora's fingers curled against her thigh. She could feel the specimen cup burning in her pocket like a tiny sun. Luca watched the exchange and something dangerous unfurled in his expression. "Did he put that look on your face?" he asked. Not Grant. Nora said nothing, which was answer enough. Grant made the mistake of laughing. "Please, Nora has always been dramatic. A chubby nurse gets overlooked once or twice and decides the world owes her reverence." Luca moved before anyone else breathed, swinging his legs off the bed, despite the fresh bandage under his ribs. Pain whitened his mouth, but he stood anyway, broad and severe, in a torn black shirt, one hand gripping the ivy pole like a scepter. Nora reached for him on instinct. "You'll tear your stitches." He looked down at her hand on his forearm, then at Grant. "She can touch what belongs to me," he said softly. "You, doctor, may not speak her name again." The corridor outside the VIP suite had filled with staff guards, donors from the late charity reception, and board members, dragged from champagne into scandal. Conversation sputtered out the moment Luca stepped through the door with Nora beside him, his jacket draped around her shoulders, though blood still marked his shirt. The crowd physically parted. Nora felt every eye move over her navy. Scrubs her round hips, her soft stomach, her flushed face. But for the first time, the staring did not feel like judgment. It felt like fear redirected. Luca's hand settled at the small of her back, steady and possessive. "Walk," he murmured. "No woman hides." Because a coward taught the room to sneer. Grant followed because pride was louder than instinct. The donor atrium glittered with abandoned champagne flutes, marble floors, and a harpist too terrified to keep playing. A banner overhead thanked the Mercer Surgical Fund, making Grant's name shine in gold behind his own unraveling. Luca stopped beneath it with Nora at his side. "Repeat what you called her," he ordered. Grant swallowed. "This is inappropriate." Luca's eyes went colder. "So was placing your insecurity in a woman's body and calling it medicine." A board member gasped. Nora's breath hitched, not because he defended her, but because he had understood the shape of Grant's cruelty without needing a history lesson. Grant's mask cracked in front of people whose approval fed him. "Mr. Santoro, you are heavily medicated." Luca leaned closer, speaking so quietly the room bent forward to hear. "And you are alive only because she is kinder than I am. Anyone who humiliates her in my presence challenges me. Anyone who plants lies around her becomes my business. Anyone who put that bug in my phone becomes a dead man walking in a very expensive coat." Grant's complexion turned grey. "Bug?" he asked too quickly. Nora heard it. Luca heard it. Half the room heard it. The first real secret entered the atrium like smoke under a locked door. Luca's hand extended toward Nora, without looking away from Grant. She placed the specimen cup in his palm. Inside, the black device blinked weakly, still trying to speak. A ripple of horror moved through the crowd. Grant's nostrils flared, but only for an instant, enough for Nora's nurse-trained eye to catch what guilt did to a pulse. "That could be anything," he snapped. "Exactly," Luca purred. "That is why you will not touch it, explain it, or bury it." He passed the cup to his second. A stone-faced man named Enzo. "Trace the signal. Quietly." Then Luca looked at Grant one last time. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, Doctor. It may be the last time people clap when you enter a room." By 3 a.m, Mercy St. Anne's no longer felt like a hospital. It felt like a fortress holding its breath. Luca's men controlled the elevators. The security cameras looped over empty corridors, and Nora sat in a supply room with the bug under a surgical lamp. She should have been suspended. She should have gone home, showered blood from her arms, and cried into cold tea. Instead, she borrowed tweezers, a cracked tablet, and the calm she saved for dying patients. Enzo watched from the door. "You are a nurse," he said. Nora did not look up. "And you are a man with a gun pretending that's a personality. We all contain multitudes." The soda crescent looked even worse under magnification. It was not only her father's style, it was his signature. The little imperfect curve he made after a childhood injury stiffened his left thumb. Nora had seen it on radios he repaired for fishermen, old pages, and once on a locked metal box he shoved under the floorboards when she was 14. The memory smelled like smoke before the fire ever started. "Who taught you?" Enzo asked, less mocking now. Nora closed the tablet before he could read her face. "A ghost," she replied. From the hallway, Luca's voice cut through the dark. "Ghosts are usually men I failed to bury properly." He had come barefoot against medical advice, wearing fresh black trousers and a hospital robe like a king insulted by cloth. Nora stood too quickly, chair scraping tile. "You need bed rest. I need Betrayal to stop breathing near me." He reached the table and studied the device. Pain tightened his jaw, but his eyes stayed on her face. "Your ghost has a name." Nora's mouth went dry. "So does yours." Luca's gaze flickered. It was the first time she saw surprise in him. Before either could strike with the truth, Enzo's phone vibrated. He listened, then went rigid. The signal bounced through the hospital server, he reported. Last hard ping came from Mercer's office. Grant Mercer did not run when Luca's men searched his office. He was too vain for running, too convinced the world would rearrange itself around his explanations. They found nothing obvious, only imported pens, surgical awards, framed magazine covers, and a locked drawer full of burner phones wiped clean with theatrical precision. Nora stood in the doorway, arms folded, feeling the stares of nurses who had believed Grant's version of her for years. He looked at her with venom. "You think standing beside a gangster makes you powerful," he hissed. Nora smiled without warmth. "No, I think surviving you made me observant." Luca's quiet chuckle behind her did more damage than shouting. The real alarm came from the ambulance bay at dawn. 2 paramedics arrived for Luca's transfer to a secure facility carrying papers with the correct logo, correct signatures, and the wrong smell. Nora noticed because hospitals live through scent. These men smelled of cedar cologne and gun oil, not antiseptic and cheap coffee. One wore boots polished for funerals, not 12-hour shifts. The other pushed the stretcher with his dominant hand hidden too carefully near his jacket. Grant, standing near the nurse's station, suddenly found a reason to leave. Nora's stomach dropped. The bug had failed, so the next attempt had arrived wearing reflective tape and smiles too flat to be tired. Nora moved before fear could negotiate with her. "Transfer is cancelled," she called, stepping between the fake paramedics and Luca's suite. The taller man smiled. Dr. Mercer approved it. Dr. Mercer also thinks a fever is a personality when it flatters him. "Show me dispatch. Confirmation." His eyes changed. That was enough. Nora slammed the emergency lockdown button, with her elbow kicked a rolling stool into the second man's path, and drove the crash cart forward with all the force people once mocked as excess. Her size became leverage anchor power. The cart hit hard enough to break rhythm, not bone. Luca's guards surged from both ends of the hall, but Nora had already stolen the attacker's first 3 seconds. The corridor exploded into controlled chaos. A nurse screamed alarms, shrieked doors sealed, and one false paramedic reached for Nora with a gloved hand. She pivoted instead of retreating using the slick floor, and her grounded weight to pull him off balance. He struck the wall shoulder first, cursing. The second lunged toward Luca's door, but Nora caught the strap of his medical bag and hooked it around the handle of a supply cabinet. He jerked backward, trapped just long enough for Enzo to arrive. No gore, no glory. Just training instinct and furious practicality. Luca opened his suite door despite the danger, dark eyes fixed on Nora like she had rewritten gravity. When it ended, both intruders were face down under armed restraint, and Nora stood breathing hard in the wreckage of spilled gauze, cracked plastic, and her own shaking hands. Luca reached her first. His palm slid to the back of her neck, warm and steady beneath her hairline. "You were told to stay away from danger." Nora laughed, once brittle and breathless. "I'm a trauma nurse. Danger fills out paperwork and complains about waiting." His mouth almost softened. "Who are you?" he asked. This time the question was not accusation. It was awe with a blade hidden in it. Nora looked past him at the bug in Enzo's hand. "Someone whose father may have died because of your family." The silence after that was worse than shouting. Luca's face closed marble over fire. "Elias Vale," he said. Nora's heart stumbled. "You knew him. My father called him a thief. My father called your father a fool." Enzo muttered something in Italian, and wisely stepped back. Nora's voice shook, but she forced it through. "Elias built counter-surveillance for half this city, then tried to leave when clients started killing each other. He hid something before our shop burned. I thought it was paranoia, until I saw his mark in your phone." Luca's expression turned lethal in a quieter way. "Ilias disappeared the same night my mother's convoy was attacked. Then maybe both our ghosts are lying." Luca should have dismissed her. Men like him were raised to turn doubt into punishment. Instead, he stared at Nora, as if she had opened a locked room inside his chest and found someone still breathing there. "My mother survived because a warning call rerouted her car," he said slowly. "My father believed Elias sent the warning to cover his own theft." Nora pulled a small silver key from the chain beneath her scrubs. It had hung there for 15 years, warm against her skin, useless until now. "He left me this. I never found what it opened." Luca looked at the key, then at her. "Mercer knows about it." Nora remembered Grant's old questions, his false tenderness, his interest in her past. Maybe. The first layer of Grant Mercer's downfall arrived by breakfast. Not with bullets, with locked doors. His hospital badge flashed red at the surgical wing. His private parking spot was occupied by 2 federal auditors who did not smile. His Mercer fund accounts were frozen after anonymous files showed donor money traveling through shell vendors with names too polished to be accidental. He called the board chairman, then his lawyer, then his fiancée. Each conversation shortened his spine. Across the hospital, nurses who had once lowered their voices around him now watched openly. Grant's face on the morning news looked handsome, frightened and smaller than Nora had ever seen him. Luca merely sipped black coffee from a paper cup and said, "Introduction." The second layer was professional, and it hurt Grant more because vanity can survive fear longer than humiliation. By noon, surgeries were reassigned. Residents removed his name from their research posters. The hospital announced an internal review without praising his cooperation, which in elite circles was the same as blood in water. Nora passed the doctor's lounge and heard his voice cracking behind the door. "She set me up. Nora Vale has always resented me." No one answered quickly enough. That silence would follow him for years. When he saw her through the glass, his eyes filled with hatred and panic. Nora expected triumph. Instead, she felt tired. Being right did not erase the years he had taught her to doubt her own reflection. The third layer came wrapped in diamonds and public embarrassment. Grant's fiancée, Vivienne Cross, arrived wearing a cream coat and a face arranged for cameras. She had spent 2 years pretending Nora was a tragic prelude to a better woman. Now she stood outside the hospital entrance while reporters shouted questions about dirty money and mafia patients. "Grant," she whispered loudly enough, "for microphones. My father's company cannot be connected to this." He grabbed her wrist. She pulled free as though touching him might stain. "You said the nurse was unstable," Vivienne hissed. "You said she invented things because she was jealous." Her gaze flicked toward Nora, and for the first time there was no sneer in it, only fear of choosing the wrong side. The fourth layer was the one Grant had not imagined when he chose betrayal for profit. The rival family who bought his information did not care about hospital statements, donor optics, or polished apologies. They cared that Luca Santoro was alive, their planted bug was gone, and 2 of their men had been taken before completing a job. Grant received 3 calls from blocked numbers in 6 minutes. After the third, he vomited in a staff bathroom and came out grey. Nora saw him from the pharmacy corridor, clutching his phone like it had turned venomous. He spotted her and whispered, "You have to tell him I helped you. Please." The audacity almost made her smile. "You called me unstable an hour ago." Grant changed tactics by sunset, because cornered men often mistake cruelty for intelligence. He texted Nora from an unknown number. "Your father's lockbox is under the old shop floor. Come alone or your aunt hears what really burned that building." Nora stared at the message until the letters blurred. Her Aunt Mara was the only family she had left, a retired seamstress with a weak heart and too many memories. Luca would forbid her from going. Enzo would assign 6 guards. The smart choice was obvious, and Nora was exhausted by men deciding obvious things for her. She copied the message, hid the silver key inside her bra, and walked out through the laundry elevator with a stolen maintenance jacket. The old Vale repair shop stood under a dead neon sign in South Boston, wedged between a closed bakery and a pawn shop that had survived 3 owners and 1 stabbing rumor. Rain silvered the sidewalk. The front window still carried smoke ghosts in the corners, though new locks shone on the door. Nora entered through the alley, heart punching hard enough to hurt. Inside, dust-coated shelves of cracked radios, yellow invoices and childhood afternoons she had tried to bury. "You always did come," when family was mentioned. Grant's voice called from the dark. He stepped from behind the counter, with a gun held badly, and desperation held worse. "Give me the key, Nora. Then maybe we both live." Nora raised her hands, letting fear show because frightened women were underestimated more cheaply than armed men. "You planted the bug," she said. Grant's laugh trembled. "I facilitated access. There's a difference. You used my father's design, your father's leftovers," he snapped. "The Ravenos paid for anything tied to Santoro history. I thought the device would transmit Luca would die, and your fingerprints would explain everything. A tragic, jealous nurse tampering with a patient's phone." The words hollowed the room. Nora felt the old shame try to rise, then fail. Her body was not a hiding place for his lies anymore. It was the reason her concealed recorder, taped beneath her scrub waistband, had captured every word. Grant saw her glance down and lunged. Nora did not run. She slammed her shoulder into a shelving unit her father had bolted unevenly when she was 12, sending a rain of dead radios between them. Grant stumbled, cursing, and Nora dropped to the floorboards, finding the warped plank by memory. The silver key fit a metal lockbox buried in ash and dust. Inside lay a data drive, a bundle of photographs, and one letter addressed to her in her father's blocky handwriting. She grabbed all of it as Grant recovered, but the alley door burst open before he could cross the room. Luca entered with rain on his hair and murder in his eyes. "Step away from my nurse." The room seemed too small for him. He wore a masterfully tailored charcoal coat over black, fresh stitches hidden under power, his movements silent despite broken glass underfoot. Grant's gun lowered by instinct, then rose again, out of panic. "She came alone," he blurted. Luca's gaze never left him. No, she came first. Enzo appeared behind him with two men, and Grant's courage died visibly. Nora stood dusty, breathing hard, clutching her father's lockbox to her chest. Luca looked at the recorder clipped under her waistband, then at the shelves, the open floor, the defeated surgeon. Pride flashed in his eyes, dark and fierce. "You did not need rescue," he murmured. Nora answered, "No, but I don't mind backup." Grant fell to his knees before anyone touched him. That was the ugliest part. Not the betrayal, not the insults, not even the plan to frame her for murder. It was how quickly arrogance became begging when power changed hands. "Nora, please, tell him I didn't mean the personal things. Tell him I was scared. You know me." She looked at him and remembered 3 years of shrinking in restaurants, hospital corridors, and bedroom mirrors. Then she remembered the women watching her in the atrium, waiting to see whether cruelty could be answered without becoming cruelty. "I know you," she said. "That is why I am not asking him to stop." Luca snapped his fingers. Grant was taken into the rain without ceremony. The lockbox changed everything. Back at Luca's penthouse high above the harbor, Nora read her father's letter while dawn bruised the sky lavender. Elias had not betrayed the Santoros. He had discovered a planned assassination, warned Luca's mother, copied the payment records, and hidden them before the Ravenos burned his shop to silence him. He wrote that one day powerful men would call him traitor because dead men could not correct stories. He wrote that Nora should never let anyone make her small enough to fit inside their lies. Luca stood by the window, one hand pressed to his bandaged jaw tight with an emotion he did not want witnessed. "My father ruined his name," he said. "Then fix it," Nora replied. By evening, Boston's underworld shifted without announcing itself. The Ravenna accounts linked to Grant vanished into legal seizures and illegal consequences Nora did not ask about. The hospital board received copies of Elias Vale's evidence, Grant's recorded confession, and the donor fraud trail. Police received enough to act, though Luca's lawyers made sure Nora's name stayed protected. Grant's fiancée returned the ring by courier. His photograph disappeared from the surgical wing before the plaque dust had time to settle. Yet none of that felt as strange as the matte black box waiting outside Nora's apartment door, tied with a crimson ribbon, heavy as spilled wine. The card inside bore Luca's sharp handwriting. "Wear red tonight. My driver arrives at 8. The dress was not designed to apologize. Deep crimson velvet spilled from the box like a dare cut to honor the lush slope of Nora's hips, the fullness of her chest, the soft strength of her arms. It did not compress her or disguise her. It celebrated. Nora stood before the mirror for a long time, one hand over the curve of her stomach, expecting Grant's old voice to rise from habit. It did not. Instead, she heard Luca in the hospital corridor. No woman hides, because a coward taught the room to sneer. At 8 exactly, she stepped into the black car waiting below red velvet, glowing against the night like a warning flare. Luca's private dining room occupied the top floor of a harbor hotel that ordinary guests believed ended 3 stories lower. Candlelight shivered across black marble, silver cutlery, and windows full of restless water. He stood when Nora entered, and for the first time she saw him truly unguarded. Not harmless, never that, but struck silent. His midnight suit fit him with brutal elegance, broad shoulders, dark eyes, mouth softened by wonder. He had no practice hiding. "You look like every man who underestimated you should apologize to the floor," he murmured, taking her hand. Nora blushed, then refused to look away. "That might take all night." "Good," Luca replied. "I paid for privacy." Dinner should have been terrifying. Instead, it was impossible and intimate. Luca fed her stories between courses of lobster, risotto, roasted figs, bitter greens, and chocolate so dark it tasted like a secret. He asked about her first code, her first patient, the aunt, who taught her to hem uniforms when money was thin. He listened as if each answer mattered strategically and spiritually. Nora asked about his mother, and the room changed. Luca looked toward the black water. She never trusted the story about Elias, he admitted. My father did. I inherited his certainty because certainty is easier than grief. Nora touched the stem of her glass, and now his eyes returned to her. Now I distrust anything that made you suffer. The final interruption arrived with dessert because men like Grant never understood when a stage no longer belonged to them. Enzo entered first, expression carved from annoyance. Behind him, 2 guards dragged Grant Mercer into the candlelight. He looked ruined in a wrinkled shirt, one cheek bruised from panic rather than battle hair wet from rain or sweat. He was found trying to reach the service elevator, Enzo reported. He said Miss Vale would want to hear his apology. Luca's face emptied of softness. The harbor windows reflected him as something ancient and merciless. Miss Vale owes him nothing, he said. Grant's eyes crawled to Nora, desperate and wet. Nora, please. Tell him you forgive me. Nora stood slowly, crimson velvet, falling around her like judgment. Grant stared at the dress, and she saw the exact moment he realized she was beautiful without his permission. You told everyone I was unstable because you needed my grief to look like guilt, she said calmly. You mocked my body because my competence scared you. You used my father's name because dead men cannot slap cowards. Grant sobbed once. I was under pressure. The Ravenous would have exposed my debts. Nora felt nothing but pity, clean and distant. Then you should have sold your watch, not my life. She looked at Luca. I don't need revenge anymore. Luca nodded once. Convenient. I already arranged consequences. Grant was removed into a future of trials, debts, vanished allies and enemies who no longer found him useful. Nora did not watch the door close. She watched Luca watching her, the candle between them bent in a draught gold light sliding over his chiseled jaw, his tired eyes, the bloodless knuckles of the hand he kept curled to hide pain. Are you afraid of me? He asked, voice lower than before. The question held no performance, only the truth of what he was and what loving him might cost. Nora stepped closer, red velvet whispering over marble. I'm afraid of losing myself again, she admitted, but not of you. Luca exhaled like a man spared execution. He reached for her, with the restraint of someone who could command cities, but knew this answer had to be given, not taken. His large, calloused hand cupped her cheek warm, despite the cold violence he carried everywhere else. Then hear me clearly, Nora Vale. From this night forward, no one uses your softness as a weapon against you. No one buries your father in lies. No one calls you less in a room where I still breathe. You are not my weakness. You are my queen. Her tears came silently. Not from humiliation this time, but from recognition. When he kissed her, it was not conquest. It was a vow pressed against her mouth. Weeks later, Mercy St. Anne's renamed the old surgical fund after Elias Vale, though the plaque never mentioned Mafia debts, stolen bugs, or the woman in red who dragged truth from smoke. Nora returned to trauma work with her head high, lush curves under fresh navy scrubs and a hospital full of people suddenly remembering how respect sounded. Luca recovered slowly and badly, complaining only when she changed his bandages with professional indifference. The city whispered that the Santoro king had found his nurse, his witness, and his conscience. Maybe that was true. Maybe love in dark places always began with a hidden device and one dangerous question. Did you love seeing Nora rise from mocked nurse to untouchable queen? Hit like, share, subscribe, and comment whether Grant deserved every consequence.